This reading appeared in the Sunday message from Reverend David M. Sargent. When he was 20 years old, Terry Dobson, an Aikido martial arts expert, was on a train in Tokyo when a huge, drunk, and dirty laborer came staggering into the car, screaming wildly. This drunken man swung at a woman holding a baby, knocking her over, then advanced looking for other victims. Although Aikido is an art of reconciliation, it studies how to resolve conflict, not start it, Dobson admitted that in his heart he had always wanted a legitimate opportunity whereby he might save the innocent by destroying the guilty. And this was it. He blew the brute a kiss, successfully attracting his ire. Dobson was going to flatten this guy. But just as the drunk hauled off to hit him, a voice from the side cried out, "Hey!" and a little old man, beaming happily, invited the drunk to sit down. As the drunk defiantly stood his ground, the immaculate gentleman asked what he'd been drinking. Ignoring the swearing which he got in reply, the gentleman conjectured, "Sake?" He then went on to say in a very pleasing voice that he and his wife enjoyed sake often. The laborer stopped and looked confused. Then suddenly he was sobbing, admitting that his wife was dead, and he had no home and no job and was ashamed of himself. The Aikido expert had seen and was ready to respond to a human monster. The old man assumed a spark of the divine. Had the drunk been flattened, Dobson would have been a hero. But this story illuminates everything that is so different about living the first principle. When the Aikido expert left the train, the drunk's head was in the old man's lap.
Thank you. We consider inherent worth. The first principle between the UU congregations and the UUA lists up for our consideration the inherent worth and dignity of every person. Now, this principle has been the subject of some debate within our association. I recall UU adult religious education classes where I heard not one, not two, but several people say, "I don't think inherent worth and dignity applies to everyone." Even the Reverend Bill Schultz, once the president of the UUA, once the president of Amnesty International, has questioned the efficacy of our first principle. His time at Amnesty International allowed him to become well acquainted with torture, violence, and hatred. There is some of that in our world, for sure that is true. And Schultz has come to see the overwhelming sentiment of the human community that torture is outside of the bounds of civilized behavior. And so identifies torture with evil and evil with torture. But despite this, Schultz argues for the first principle. He warns us against the naive or one-sided understanding of human nature. Life is big. Some will fail, some will fall, others will wither away. But through it all, we are helped, and we will be helped if we accept the worth and dignity of every person. There are two ways, actually there's another, ambivalence, and we're not going to deal with that, but we'll talk about two ways we can think of other people. One is acceptance, the other is condemnation. both approaches have religious roots. We accept and promote the inherent worth and dignity of every person. But our faith, at least through our Unitarian ancestors, evolved out of Calvinism. This view of life sees all people as being born in sin. I feel free to speak of this because the Calvinism of my childhood faith has never fully vanished. I have a memory. I recall. And I know that Calvin emphasized humanity's evils. Perdition outlines his view of life. Children who were raised in this faith were told, those who are not one of us are bound for hell. And this led to watch out for them, do not trust them, avoid them if you can. Now, a similar religious commendation happened several times in condemnation, not commendation, condemnation, happened several times in our country's history. Wikipedia tells us historians and theologians identify 3 or 4 waves of increased religious enthusiasm between the early 18th and the late 19th century. Each great awakening was characterized by widespread revivals featuring a hell, fire, and damnation fever led by evangelical Protestant ministers. My transition away from such a life view developed when I read the story of Salem, an event that happened right in the backyard of our Massachusetts Unitarians. I recall when I read that story that I felt, and I am quite certain our religious ancestors felt too, the religious fervor in the people of Salem. There was an urgency to their faith that not only allowed them, but also led them to condemn their neighbors to death. Anyone's claim of witchcraft set in motion a pattern that led to the gallows. But it was not just Salem where citizens were condemned, and it was not just among Protestants that hellfire and damnation were preached. There was a long European tradition where accusations of witchcraft led to death. One of the most common methods was to have the accused, almost always a woman, lie on a plank, cover work with another plank, and pile on boulders. As each heavy stone was added, an opportunity was granted for confession. People stood around and cheered as each stone, heavy stone, was added to the pile. Sadly, whether confessions were offered or not, the weight of the stones always led to death. Squashed to death. I don't know about you, but all of these stories of religiously inspired crimes against humanity convinced me, and I think also our spiritual ancestors, to be much more accommodating to our views toward others. And this has led, in more recent history, to some changes. Last month, as I began to discuss the principles and purposes, I looked at their history, and I said then that the original covenant formed in the 1961 consolidation of Unitarians and Universalists had phrases in it like the progress of mankind, the dignity of man, ideals of brotherhood, and men of goodwill. I see a smile or two. These statements led the Unitarian Universalist Women's Federation to bring a resolution to the 1977 General Assembly pointing out the patriarchal character of our faith. Well, when I look at that movement and I see where it came from, I realize that one of its guiding forces was Jane Addams. Jane Addams, a Presbyterian, attended Unitarian services and an ethical society when she ran Hull House in Chicago. Adams said, "I believe that peace is not merely an absence of war. I believe that peace is the nurture of human life. And that in time, this nurture of human life will do away with war as a natural process." I add not only war, but hopefully other types of aggravation and irritation and unkindness between people. Adams quickly added, "Only in freedom is permanent peace possible." Her views on nurture of human life and freedom became part and parcel of not only our first principle, but I also find it resting and abiding in the 6 principles that follow. So, we are a faith that not only accepts evolution, we realize we are in the midst of evolving. Our faith has long been guided by new ideas that promote change, development, advancement, and some of them seem to be radical when they first appeared. But over time, we have come to see the ethical value of promoting the worth of our brothers and sisters. And although at times we have stumbled, we remain committed to the unity of humanity, the importance of brotherhood and sisterhood, and continuing the process of moving onward and upward forever. For that is what evolution is. Today, we no longer accept the progress of mankind as we once did. Our guide, our underlying zeitgeist, looks to the process of humanity and our path to self-improvement. And this progress begins in our covenant to affirm and promote the inherent worth and dignity of every person. So now I'd like to share a little story. I found these post-its on the Pelicans fan page. Are there any Pelicans fans here? Okay, I'm looking for 6 Pelicans fans. And I'm going to hand out these here. First, you will be first, but not just yet. I'll tell you what. Second. Third. Fourth. We have another? Fifth.
Bruce.
Somebody who will, yes. And somebody else who
Bruce.
will say that you are. Okay. All right. Thank you so much. The Pelicans fan page allows players to post their tweets, sports writers break news stories on the team, fans can chat. And I'm one of those fans. Although I don't chat, I just read. One of those chats this past week dealt with Lamar Odom, a former basketball player, once and still married to Khloe Kardashian, who who was found in a coma in a brothel in Nevada. I think I can talk about this. This was in the news. I'm not sharing any information we haven't heard or talking about any former senators or governors. I'm not doing any of that. What I'm doing is I'm just sharing what's in the news. So I would like for you, Liz, to read the comment of the first poster after the story was posted that said, Lamar Odom is fighting for his life.
Sad.
Thank you. That now goes to Marcel, and then the next person can put their hand up, and Marcel, you can get it to the next person. This was on the news this week, and the second poster wrote,
Dude was in Vegas with Bunny Ranch and apparently was full of herbal Viagra and yak. Latest word is that he's in coma, and I think I read he's brain dead. They found him unresponsive. I'm not sure how long he was in that condition. So the prognosis is not good. Prayers to him and his fans. Sad indeed.
okay. Now there is some concern here. And also, as I read, a somewhat better description of the situation from a third fan who said,
what a crazy way to go out. But I'm not expecting or speaking that into existence. And I'm hoping and expecting they'll make a full recovery.
to this point, the fans are all concerned about Odom. The last one has wished him well. But this is about to turn, because the next writer, the fourth one, said,
That's called Darwin's Law. Eventually, some of the many stupid must die. Considering all the blank he's done in his life, drugs, alcohol abuse, etc., I can't say I'd be hugely sorry about this. The guy certainly had no monetary problems to get the needed help.
whoa, that is a tough condemnation of Odom. But this is not only a writer that shows no regard for Odom's well-being. I can't say I'd be hugely sorry. This writer also dumps on a shovelful of reproach. Certainly had no monetary problems to get the needed help. If the truth be told, though, the thought also crossed my mind that this was all his fault. It can be easily seen that way. But that was a temporary point. There was another way to look at Odom's problem, as the fifth post said.
That's a very disrespectful analysis, coming from someone who doesn't know the guy. Please keep thoughts like that to yourself.
I felt a sense of relief when I read these words. You see, relief because I was, in the course of this week, very focused on the inherent worth and dignity of every person. And despite the difficult situation in which Odom had fallen, for I do think of it as a fall, he is still worthy of the full respect we offer to any human being. A point confirmed by the sixth post.
Yes, very disrespectful indeed. Never judge a man till you've walked in his shoes. I knew about him losing his child to infant mortality syndrome a few years back. His mom died of cancer when he was 12. His dad was a drug addict. His son died when he was 6 months old. His cousin was murdered, and the day after his cousin's funeral, he was a passenger in a car that was involved in an accident that killed a 15-year-old. That's a lot of heavy burdens to carry, millionaire athlete or not.
We never know what's going on with someone else. We cannot see into their life or the events that have affected them, yet we all carry our own opinions. And we all form these opinions as we go. Am I right? The most important value of our first principle, though, I think, is not how we think of others. It is in how we are becoming in this process of thinking of others. In our two stories, will we get stuck with the view that the sake-consuming laborer should be decked by the Aikido expert? Or can we move towards saying, we drink sake too? Come on, let's talk. Will we like the idea that I can't say I'd be hugely sorry about this, or move toward never judge a man or a person until you walk in his or her shoes? There's a little bit of the golden rule in our first principle. And so it takes us to this. Do we accept that our neighbors are equal to us? Equal. Do we see them as having equity with us? Do we look to extend fairness to all? Is there justice, not just for us and our family, but justice for all? Will peace be there in our hearts, but will we also see peace into the hearts of those around us? Do these ethical values that we affirm apply to every person? Inasmuch, I say, as there is injustice toward anyone, there is injustice toward everyone. As Martin Luther King Jr. put it, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. The first principle leads toward our self-improvement. It requires, for many of us, an ongoing paradigm shift. It is a reminder, a call to task. It is something that repeats and 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 repeats day after day, week after week, month after month, as we continue to do what we can. It is a guide toward becoming all we can be in our homes, with our neighbors, in our cities, in our nations, and the world. How are you doing with this? May the love of your hearts find love in the hearts of those around you. Namaste. Let's turn to hymn number 143. Not in vain the distance beacons into joy. Let us rise and sing.